Hey guys, Bob here. So hey, hope you had a great long weekend. I'm actually joined today with Lee Tessler from Cirrus Consulting. So hey, Lee, thanks for being here today.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks for having me. First time on your podcast, on your show. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm not even really sure what to call this still at this point. We're just kind of going with the word series. But anyways, it's been a lot of fun right now. Had a wide range of people on so far, and you were someone I thought of early on as someone I wanted to have on, and talk to. For those of you guys that don't know, I'll ask Lee to kind of get into the details here, but Cirrus Consulting specializes in lease negotiations for dentists, for medical facilities. And obviously right now with COVID, with this environment, the lease and what's going on with an office's lease is probably a high priority. And so Lee, please kind of fill us in exactly in more detail. What does Cirrus do? How long have you guys been doing this?
Yeah, sure. So, like Bob said, essentially we are a healthcare and tenant representation company. We were actually founded by doctors for doctors in Alberta around 25 years ago, purely for the reason that the landlord was taking advantage of the dental and healthcare tenant. It's an expensive business to enter into and can be a very profitable business to, exit out as well. So, we've been proud and been working with Shine probably for the last 10 years, looking after their accounts. Myself, so I'm one of the senior consultants. I lecture across the country, giving lectures on the business side of dentistry, doing some continuing education seminars. And that's where we've been really successful. And obviously the last 6 months has been strange for everybody, but been good, been busy really.
Like you said. And I was just going to say, like, people that are watching this right now, some of them have probably met or seen you actually speak at the events that are hosted in this room that I'm in right now, turned into my pseudo studio. But again, obviously we're not doing those events anymore as the condition continues. But again, I think it's an important conversation to have. So I guess really, Lee, in this last 6 months, kind of since we saw each other last at the PDC in March, what are you seeing in the commercial real estate industry, specifically in Edmonton? I'm kind of curious also a bit about what's happening in Canada as well, but really what's kind of gone on in the last, throughout the summer?
Yeah, so we're definitely seeing a shift towards, a more friendly tenant market. I would say, at the moment, currently we're seeing vacancies around 5%, but we do expect that to probably will rise further in the next 3 or 4 quarters. Despite this, though, rental rates are staying relatively firm. There are obviously deals to be done, especially with new start, anyone opening a new start practice. There's definitely deals on the table that landlords are looking to fill spaces. We'd say that they're more keen on offering free rent rather than sort of tenant allowance improvement, probably because they just want to preserve some of their capital during the pandemic. But the economy in Edmonton is still strong, even with the low oil prices. I would say that they're a little bit more diversified than, say, Calgary, for example. And as you could probably attest to, since businesses have probably been up and running since May and June, a lot of dentists that we speak to, they're coming up to sort of 75-80%, their production post-COVID now. So, there's definitely vacancies there and spaces that need to be filled, and opportunities for the sort of more entrepreneurial type investor. But looks like people are getting back. What are you seeing from your side?
Well, right now, once dentistry did come back, a lot of the clients I've spoken to had a really surprisingly strong summer. There was that backlog of patients that needed to get in for dentistry that weren't being treated during the shutdown period. And that created a bit of a swell, a surge. And there were also some patients that were coming in early that some doctors told me that people were concerned about this time period, the fall, like September, October, November, and they wanted to get in and treated prior to that because, again, there was a little bit of uncertainty as to what's happening. And again, I think that uncertainty is carrying forward. And talking to a few doctors even last week, again, they had a really strong summer. Some were even like 115, 120% over the previous year's months. But again, looking into September, October right now, the schedule is starting to lighten up a little bit, and people are just, again, a little hesitant, a little concerned. And so that's kind of what I'm seeing from my territory and in this market. Now, I know when I'm thinking about this in this conversation that you and I are going to have today, I'm thinking there's kind of two main scenarios for offices right now. You have scenarios that are doctors whose leases are coming to the end of the term where they're in the position to renegotiate. And then you also have doctors who have maybe just entered into a lease, and say potentially worst case scenario, someone signed a lease, February 2020, and now they've got, 10 years to go. Like, so looking at those two scenarios, what opportunities exist for those doctors? What hurdles do they have to overcome, or what are their options right now?
Yeah, I mean, the normal play, which we always advised, was, anyone that's coming up for a renewal 2 years before expiry, then that was the best time to, engage the landlord. As you know, it can take, 12 months. It can take a long time if you were forced to relocate, even if you don't want to relocate. The landlord can certainly play hardball to start with and take their time delaying the process. And I would even say, with COVID now, that 2-year rule is slightly gone out the window as well. If you're sort of 2.5, 3 years and you do want to, negotiate a longer term lease, then, we're seeing a lot of landlords that are interested in that sort of proposal. If they can lock in someone, a good tenant's rent for 10 years, then they're going to listen to a proposal that, that we're suggesting or offering, being proactive. In terms of your second point, unfortunately, and I've spoken to a lot of clients that did, maybe start a new practice or sign a new lease just prior to COVID, and they're tied in for 5 or 10 years. There is not, there's not a huge amount that they can do at this stage, because, the landlord, as far as they're concerned, they're tied in. I mean, we did help a lot of the beginning of the lockdown in terms of some rent deferrals and, some of our advisory services where we were able to get some abatement or deferrals. But really in that kind of market, it's difficult to, you need to pay your rent. There's not a lot you can do to renegotiate, because there's not much incentive for the landlord to open up the lease when you've committed to sort of 8 or 9 years. You just got to make sure that, you pay your rent and on time and everything, and then look for an opportunity later down the line.
So the doctor hoping that there's a clause in the lease about, a pandemic clause that would give them, relief or give them assistance during that time frame, really likely doesn't exist. Yeah,
I mean, realistically, there was force majeure clauses, but that even during a pandemic, not one lease that I saw written said anything about not paying rent. You would obviously we managed to get some sort of deferment when businesses was shut down during lockdown, because then you're unable to run a continuous business. But you would see every small print you'd have to still pay rent. So, yeah.
It's just an unprecedented time. This is the first time this has happened in our lifetimes, and especially in this kind of modern world we live in. I guess right now, and real quick, just are other provinces in Canada having kind of similar issues, or is there anything else that's kind of going on outside the bubble of Edmonton that is kind of interesting to people to know about?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, across the sort of prairies, BC, there's still a demand in some of the more, downtown Vancouver. There's still a lot of demand. There's still people looking for spaces. So in those kind of sought after areas, I would say that there's still the opportunity, and it's still, people still looking for that great space. Toronto, a lot of demolition and relocation that has been happening prior to COVID. So that's still in play. And again, depending on the sort of supply and demand, you're still having to pay high rents in certain areas. So I would say it's, there's obviously specific to each market, but overall, we're seeing a similar sort of trend across Canada.
Now, earlier you said you were talking about Cirrus and kind of the projections you guys are doing. Like, you're projecting that more real estate, more foreclosures, more businesses kind of going out of business for the next, 6 to 12 months. Is that what you said? So at that point,
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think what we're seeing is right now, that there's still businesses are still hurting. A lot of maybe not as much in healthcare, but more retail, more, restaurants, more other businesses. And I think, especially when, kids and everybody starts to go back to school in this quarter, then we really will see, hopefully there's not a second wave, but we'll see where we're at, because I think after a lot of the government programs and some of the support loans that were given, again, they're all coming to an end. So I think we will probably see a continued downturn for the next couple of quarters. And then if we can get back to some normality in the new year, then, hopefully we can see some rebound.
So how long do you think, and again, obviously, want to be optimistic on everything, but plan for the worst, hope for the best sort of thing. How long do you think this would have to kind of continue before you would see a dramatic decrease in rents for new rental spaces?
Well, I think right now that there's a great opportunity. There's almost like 2 or 3 different kind of levels of a buyer, or depending on what stage of your career you're at. If I'm working with a lot of associates that are now saying, right, this is a great opportunity to get, equipment, cheaper equipment. I know China, are doing deals. Interest rates are as low as they've been for a long time. So we're seeing a lot of associates that are saying, you know what, I've been thinking about this for a while. Now what better time now to actually start that practice? So if you're a new start associate, or if you've been looking at that first time practice, then I think now is a great opportunity. And like you said, if you're in a mid-career dentist and maybe you've been at your location for 10, 15 years, you just want to have some sort of, continuity in terms of, you want to know what you're paying in rent. You want to make sure that your location is looked after and that there's no issues, there's no relocation, and the lease is tight and secured. Then we're seeing that opportunity to renegotiate. Like I said, if you're sort of 2 or 3 years up to your expiring, and then you have to sort of transition, the more of the doctors that are saying, I was thinking potentially maybe retiring in the next year or two, and COVID is maybe that's brought that more forward. So in those scenarios, I don't think rent is the forefront of their minds. A transitioning doctor just wants to make sure the lease is structured, correctly, and that they're able to transfer the lease or assign it to a potential buyer. So it really depends on where you're at and what your sort of appetite for investment is, because there's definitely people are looking at second practices opening up if there's opportunities. So in terms of my last point was, that in any kind of, I don't want to put a pessimistic spin on things, but like you said, being realistic, when the market is moving like this, there's always opportunities.
But overall, what you're saying too, what you're seeing is there still is a lot of optimism in the dental industry, in the real estate industry. There's a lot of people that are looking at ways how to take advantage of the situation, the time frame. Yeah,
for sure. I would say, yeah, for sure. I mean, we've obviously been banging the drum about the lease and the importance of it for a long time. And, I know a lot of dentists, they look at the first couple of pages of the financials and what they're paying, but this has been a great, in terms of us, we've been busy. We've been, everybody suddenly wants to know what's in their lease and what they can and can't do, and what's negotiable.
And so I was thinking, I was assuming and wondering how busy you guys have been during this time frame. And it sounds like you have been busy, but it's time to dust that thing off and pull it out of the closet, out of the the bottom drawer of the desk, and actually take a look through it to kind of see what an office could be entitled to, kind of what opportunities exist. So
for sure. I mean, even if you're, you're going to be in the same location and you had to spend 30,000-40,000 on PPE and making the office, up to scratch. These are the things that we ask for the landlord to contribute and to help. If we're saying we want to stay at this location, want to sign a long-term lease for 10 years, then we want some, favorable, returns on our end as well. We're committing to the space. So yeah, dust off that the lease that's been sitting in your drawer and send it over to Bob or to me. And we actually, we do offer a complimentary lease consultation. If that's something that your clients would be interested, I'd be more than happy to offer that on your behalf of.
And hey, I'm actually glad you brought that up, because it was something I wanted to touch on today too. And that lease negotiation, that lease review that you guys do, it's not for someone whose lease is about to expire in, say, like the 2-year time frame. Anyone can do that at any point throughout their lease, correct?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, if you just want to know what's in your lease and it doesn't expire for 5 years, then we're happy to look at that. We will be realistic in terms of expectation. We don't want to give you too many sleepless nights, because there's probably not too much we can do. But yeah, we would spend 3 to 4 hours. We would look at some of the comparables and rental rates in the market, see what you're paying currently, and then we would just look through the legal provisions to see if there's any liabilities or areas of concern that we feel should be addressed. And like I said, if you're in that sort of time window, I was speaking to a client the other day. Their lease doesn't expire for over 3 years, and they wanted to, again, they were trying to get the rents down, and they're asking what we can do. And I said, look, if your landlord is willing to negotiate, all right, we don't want to give you false, hope and say you've got 5 years left and we can reduce the rent, because it's unrealistic. But if you're expiring in 3 or 4 years and the landlord is willing to, re-engage and have a conversation, you have to offer something, an incentive for them. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, they're just going to say, they're not going to come to the table. But, there's opportunities for sure.
Now, on that topic about like lease negotiations, you're in that last time frame, the 2 years, and you're looking to renegotiate. Is it in the best interest for the doctor, the client, to try to renegotiate with their current landlord, stay where they are, and maybe try to get their rent reduced, or should they really be looking at relocating, even if it's just across the street, down the street to a different location? Like, will that landlord be more likely willing to renegotiate at a lower rent and offer provisions for leasehold improvements, or should they really be trying to negotiate with their current landlord and stay where they are?
It's a great question. One that we get asked a lot, actually. I mean, the way that we try and, strategically negotiate, and, our lease negotiators in-house and lawyers do this every day. It is it's a strategy. It's a game of chess, a game of poker, however you want to call it. We don't, if you have 2 years left and you love the location and you love the space and you have no intention of leaving, the landlord doesn't have to know that. As far as he's concerned, we're looking across the road, there's new developments, we're being offered this and that. And, you have to play the game to the landlord believe, it's a bit of cat and mouse in some cases. As far as they're aware, that if we're not being looked after and we've been at your, space for 10 years and we're looking to sign for another 10 years and we don't like what we're being offered, then yeah, as far as they're concerned, we're happy. We would potentially relocate. It's all part of the negotiation strategy. Obviously, there comes to a point where, someone will concede, but majority of the time, the way that we do, our process, there's a lot of work that's done. We don't just pick up the phone to the landlord and say, hi, Mr. Landlord, we want to renegotiate. We look at what is available. We come in, with all the ammunition that we have, and we're not looking to upset the relationship with the landlord. That's one thing. We know that tenants, they've got to have to work with these landlords for a long period of time. It's just about educating them, and you're going to have to concede some things, and some things you're going to fight tooth and nail to get success and to get wins.
Talking about fighting tooth and nail and for the negotiating process, I know we've spoken in the past about certain clauses that you guys generally like to get amended or taken out of leases. For someone who's maybe watching this right now and has the interest in flipping through their lease, what type of clauses do you guys generally see that are kind of the most problematic that you try to get out of a lease, even if you end up paying more money per square foot to remove that clause? What are a few of those concerns that, doctors should be aware of?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's probably 20, 25 legal provisions. Just to name a few, you want to make sure that if there's any sort of relocation or demolition clause, that's a red flag. In some cases, we're able to remove that completely. In other scenarios, we want to, extend the notice period, or at least have some sort of blackout period, so they can't, demolish the building for a long time. You have to look out for the assignment and subletting provision. That's key when it comes to transfer and normally in conjunction with selling the practice, because, the landlord holds the keys to say, if you have a buyer that you want to take over the space, the landlord can say yes or no, really. And that is a key provision. We look at some of the sort of, trade fixtures and some of the surrender language, restoration provision. In most cases, the tenant will, probably sell the practice to an incoming buyer. But if they were to relocate, what are your what are the surrender provisions? Can you, who does the leasehold improvements, who does the trade fixtures, who does that belong to? Because in some cases, any cabinetry or anything affixed to the space automatically becomes, possession of the landlord. And if anyone has ever had to relocate or had to, put back their space to pre-dental condition, that can be a very expensive project, as I'm sure you're aware of.
Yeah, the trenching in the floor is just made my skin crawl. And so again, a lot of things that people just generally don't think about or get missed or breezed over. Also, I guess a question I just had too is, when a person's looking for a place to lease, I had one doctor tell me, and I think I was actually recommending Cirrus Consulting that they should talk to you guys. And this one doctor was going to look to lease a place out of one of the larger landlord institutions, and I forget which one it was actually. But anyways, I said, hey, you should talk to Cirrus Consulting. They, specialize in this specifically for dentists. And their basic response was that they were going into a place that was, again, a major landlord. It's like, these guys have, he thought there's no opportunity to negotiate. And so really all he would be doing is employing you, would be paying a bill and get no more than you would get out of the lease, versus just, him doing it himself, or his brother who might be a lawyer or someone or whatever else. Like, is that true? Should a person be looking to lease from a smaller mom and pop type landlord company, or can you really negotiate with the big guys in this market?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is some of the misconception, and we hear a lot that the tenant will say, this landlord, he doesn't negotiate, and I've never had any success with it. But unfortunately, that is a preconception. Look, don't get me wrong, there's a mama and papa, there's a strategy that we would use if we're doing a large REIT compared to a mum and papa. But, we've had huge success with a lot of the REITs that we've actually worked with, because we know what they're looking for. And when I hear a doctor, a tenant say, this landlord's never going to negotiate, and then I actually sort of get into the weeds of, well, what happened before? And they did it themselves, or they used a lawyer that was, the brother-in-law, like you said, never done one dental lease negotiation in his life. They don't know what to ask for. They don't know how to have the conversation. So I would, I wouldn't necessarily just pick on what the landlord is. You need to find the space that suits you. Mm-hmm. But there is always a negotiation. There is always a conversation to be had. You're a specialist at what you do, Bob, and the dentists are specialists at what they do, and their money is much better being chairside.
And you're a specialist in what you do. So hey Lee, I want to thank you for doing this. Like I said, we kind of don't want to have this go on too long, so I really wanted to kind of touch on a few points which we have, and I think you've hopefully offered a lot of information to the people watching this. We talked about the lease negotiation, so the lease review. So again, anyone watching this, if you want to reach out to Lee, I'll include his contact information down in the email below. If Lee has any PDFs and documents that he wants to send to me, I'll also set forward in this email as well, so you guys can review the PDFs. If you want to have your lease reviewed at no charge, I think it's around a $1,500 value.
That's correct.
contact me, contact Lee. Just tell him that you got his contact information from this episode. But Lee, real quick before we kind of wrap this thing up, anything else kind of in closing that you wanted to mention, or anything that you wanted to discuss that we haven't touched on yet?
I think we've covered the main topics. I would say just make sure in terms of your lease, just make sure you know your critical dates, because I think that's one of the key things. Is lots of people their lease, I think it expires in 2 or 3 years, but they may have an option to exercise to extend that lease, and if that option expires, if they miss that window, then they lose a lot of leverage. So I think my main point is, find your lease. Like Bob said, I would be more than happy to review it on Bob's behalf. Even if you're just thinking about relocating or buying a second practice, or just want to talk strategy, more than happy to help, and we can go into a little bit more detail.
Well, Lee, hey, thanks a lot. I really hope everyone watching this takes you up on that. I think it's a great opportunity. And again, hey, we can do this again. So if there's more things for us to discuss in the real estate market, we can definitely do that. Always looking forward to finding more interesting people to talk to. Anyone watching this right now, if you've got specific questions for Lee, please, ask away. Again, his email and contact will be down in the body of the email. If you have ideas that you want us to discuss, either me and Lee or me and someone else to discuss on this series, please let me know. But hey, Lee, thanks again. Let's call it a day right now. Let's get back to your busy day. But thanks a lot. And everyone out there, have a great day. Stay safe. And we'll talk to you guys soon. So, hey, bye for now.
Thanks for having me.